Saint Martin de Porres was born in Lima, Peru on December 9th, 1519, to Don Juan de Porres, a Spanish nobleman and adventurer, and Ana Velázquez, a freed daughter of slaves from Panama. Ana was probably black, but it is also possible that she belonged to the indigenous people Lima. Martin had a younger sister named Juana as well. Martin inherited the features and dark complexion of his mother. That irked his father, and he abandoned the family when Martin was very young. He was raised by his mother in extreme poverty as she worked in a laundry. Stories of Martin's remarkable generosity apparently began to surround him even in childhood. Even as a child, Martin would give the family's scarce resources to the beggars, whom he saw as less fortunate than himself. By the time he was 10, he was spending several hours each day in prayer, a practice he maintained for the rest of his life. He once asked his landlady for the stumps of some candles she had discarded. She later saw him using their meager light to behold a crucifix, before which he knelt, weeping. Perhaps as a result of the boy's spiritual character, Don Juan de Porres acknowledged that he was Martin's father, a remarkable admission at the time. At the age of 12, Martin began an apprenticeship with a barber named Marcel de Rivero. A barber's work during the 16th century involved more than just cutting hair. It involved administering medicines, dressing wounds, and drawing blood. He proved extremely skillful at this trade, and soon customers who at first were skeptical of the young colored boy came to prefer and ask for him. As Martin grew older, he experienced a great deal of ridicule for being of mixed race. At 15, Martin decided to devote himself to the religious life. He applied to join the Covenant of the Rosary in Lima, a Dominican ministry. Racial restrictions during the time did not allow colored people to become members of religious order. Instead, he was offered the position of lay helper, which he happily accepted. Martin was allowed to wear the habit and live within the religious community. His medical skills proved useful, and he was put in charge of the monastery infirmary. He was also given the monastery's basic chores, such as cleaning, cooking, and doing the laundry. His relationship with his brothers was tinged by their curiosity and occasional pranks. Sometimes, just before the meal was to be served, the brothers would hide the potholders. Martin would search for it everywhere, and since it was mealtime, he would have to lift the scalding pots with his bare hands. Yet, never once did his fingers get burned. There are numerous incidents that portrayed his self-denial. A monk approached him and asked whether he might not prefer the life at the splendid offices of church elsewhere. Martin responded, quoting Psalm 83, "I have chosen to be an abject in the house of my God, rather than to dwell in the tabernacle of sinners." He remarked that he was not referring to the people in high offices as sinners, but rather simply that he himself preferred menial tasks. Martin often challenged his brothers on their racial attitudes. In one story, Martin saw an Indian sweeping the floor under the watchful eye of one of the Dominican brothers. When told that they were cleaning to repay a meal they had received, Martin pointed out that the brother had fed some white people the previous day without forcing them to clean. After Martin's firm but gentle challenge, the brother took up the broom himself. He always wore robes until they fell apart, refusing the luxury of new ones. The report of Martin's skill as a surgeon and healer soon spread abroad. As much by his prayers as through medical knowledge, he cured the most frightening diseases, bringing from near death a priest who had a badly infected leg, and healing the fingers of a young student. Great as his healing faculty was, Martin is probably best remembered for the legend of the rats. It is told that the prior who objected to rats ordered Martin to set out poison for them. Martin did as he was told, but he was very sorry for the rats. He went out into the garden and called softly, and out came the rats. He reprimanded them for their bad habits, telling them about the poison. He further assured them that he would feed them every day in the garden if they would refrain from annoying the prior. This agreed upon, he dismissed the rats, and forever after, so the stories go, there was no more trouble with rats. In addition to the gift of healing, he was endowed with that of bilocation. He was seen in Mexico and Japan by people who knew him well, whereas he had never been out of Lima since entering the order. He passed through locked doors by some means that was known only to himself and God. He appeared at the bedside of sufferers without being asked, and always soothed the sick, even when he did not completely cure them. Even sick animals came to him for healing. He would apply his medical skills to the treatment of a wounded dog found wandering the streets with the same energy he would devote to a sick human. 10 years later, after he had been presented with the religious habit of a lay brother, Martin was assigned to the infirmary, where he would remain in charge until his death. Martin's spiritual practices were legendary. He would often fast for extensive periods of time on bread and water. He loved all-night vigils, frequently praying by laying down as if crucified, sometimes kneeling, but miraculously a foot or more off the floor. However, it is St. Martin's charity that made him the patron saint of social justice. Martin fed, sheltered, and doctored hundreds of families. He also provided the requisite dowry to enable a poor young woman to marry. Last but not least, he established the orphanage and school of the Holy Cross, which took in boys and girls of all classes and taught them trades or homemaking skills. He died surrounded by his brothers and reciting the Credo, his life ending with the words, "Et homo factus est." Saint Martin died on November 3rd, 1639. By the time he died, he was widely known and accepted. Talks of his miracles in medicine and caring for the sick were everywhere. After his death, the miracles received when he was invoked in such greatness that when he was exhumed 25 years later, his body exhaled a splendid fragrance and he was still intact. In our own day, the miracles continue. He lived a life of almost constant prayer, and he practiced unbelievable austerities. He worked at hard and menial tasks without ever losing a moment of union with God. His charity, humility, and obedience were extraordinary. Pope John XIII raised Martin de Porres to the altar of the church on May 5th, 1962. Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into our channel, where we share God's love, hope, and truth through inspiring stories, teachings, and creative content. We're so grateful for your support, your likes, your comments, and your prayers. They mean the world to us. As you know, creating high-quality Christian content takes time, resources, and a lot of heart. But here's the reality. We simply can't keep this going on YouTube revenue alone. The ads you see just don't cover the costs of production, editing, and everything else that goes into sharing this message with the world. That's why we're asking for your help. If you believe in what we're doing and want to see this channel continue to grow and reach more people, please consider supporting us through Patreon or PayPal. Even a small contribution makes a big difference. It helps us produce new videos and series, upgrade our equipment for better quality, and most importantly, focus on creating content that uplifts and strengthens your faith. You can join our mission by visiting our Patreon page or making a one-time donation via PayPal. The links are in the description below. Together, we can continue spreading God's Word to a world that desperately needs hope. Thank you for your prayers, your support, and for being part of this community. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video. Saint Lorenzo Ruiz is a Filipino saint venerated in the Catholic Church. A Chinese Filipino, he became his country's proto-martyr after his execution in Japan by the Tokugawa shogunate during its persecution of Japanese Christians in the 17th century. Lorenzo was born around 1600 in the Binondo district of Manila to a Catholic Chinese and Filipino couple. His father taught him Chinese, while his mother taught him Tagalog. The Spaniards ruled over the lands for 333 years, and because of this, Lorenzo spoke 3 languages: Tagalog, Spanish, and Chinese. He attended a school run by Spanish Dominican friars, as well as serving as an altar boy and a sacristan for the church in his district of Manila. The Dominicans, for their part, taught Lorenzo Spanish, as well as how to read and write. So good was his penmanship that he eventually became a professional calligrapher and a clerk. Inspired by the Dominicans, Lorenzo joined the Confraternity of the Holy Rosary. Contemporaries noticed, in a particular way, his honesty and trustworthiness, to the point that the Dominican friars made him their unofficial messenger as well. Lorenzo grew up and married a Filipino woman named Rosario, and with her had 3 children. He continued to work as a clerk and as a translator for the Spaniards, and their life remained normal. Lorenzo kept his close ties with the Dominicans and helped them in ministering to the people in Manila, especially those in the Binondo district. He led a peaceful and content life. His normal life took a bad turn when he was implicated in the murder of a Spaniard one day. Nothing further is known except the statement of 2 Dominicans that he was sought by the authorities on account of a homicide to which he was present or which was attributed to him. Ruiz couldn't trust the courts. He knew that much. A lifetime of colonial inequality had taught him that a legal battle between Spaniards and Filipinos under Spanish laws wasn't a legal battle at all. He knew that he couldn't turn to the government for help. He decided to leave his home and seek a safe place to hide for a while. He said goodbye to Rosario and left home in the darkness of night. He confided his problem to Father Domingo Gonzalez, a Dominican priest. The priest was kind towards Lorenzo, and he was allowed to board their ship. Little did Lorenzo know that they were part of a secret missionary to Japan. Lorenzo was under the impression that they were headed to Macau. He was quite surprised when they told him that they were headed to Japan. The 3 Dominican priests were Saint Antonio Gonzalez, Saint Guillermo Cortet, and Saint Miguel de Azora and Saint Miguel de Alzaraza. There was a Japanese priest present named Saint Vicente Shiwozuka de la Cruz, and also a lay leper, Saint Lazaro of Kyoto. All of them sailed for Okinawa on June 10, 1636. As soon as the group landed in Japan, they were arrested. A violent persecution against Christians was being enforced by Emperor Tokugawa Iemitsu to prevent the spread of Christianity in Japan. The missionaries were arrested and thrown into prison, and after 2 years, they were transferred to Nagasaki to face trial by torture. The group endured many and various cruel methods of torture. Back in Manila, Rosario never heard a word from Lorenzo, and no one knew what had become of him. Once the group of missionaries reached Nagasaki, they were to face trials and torture for being a Christian. The emperor gave them an offer. They could leave Japan as long as they were willing to renounce their faith. The missionaries agreed to leave Japan, but they said they will never renounce their faith. This made the shogun lord extremely furious, for none has ever refused the shogunate before. Unaccustomed to rejection, the shoguns considered the group's decision as an insult to their empire and immediately sent the prisoners to their slow and painful execution. While they were put back in the jail, they witnessed the tortures other prisoners had to endure for not obeying the emperor. The prisoners were forced to drink inhuman amounts of water. They were stabbed, pressed, soaked, and repeatedly crushed. Their captors emphasized that the torture would stop if they renounced their faith. When Lorenzo saw this, he got terrified for a moment. It was just a moment when he fell into a spiritual darkness. He quickly prayed the rosary and found relief and had more courage than before. He even started comforting his companions in jail, asking them to have faith in the Lord's grand plan. That night, he prayed the rosary as often as he could. Then came the day of execution. The missionaries were subjected to water torture first. Despite the painful torture, the men refused to renounce their faith. Following this, the soldiers hung the missionaries upside down over a large pit. One among the soldiers took pity on Lorenzo and persuaded him to renounce his faith to end his agony. Lorenzo answered, "This I will never do, because I am a Christian, and I shall die for God, and for Him I would give many thousands of lives if I had them. And so, do with me as you please." Lorenzo died from bleeding and suffocation, and so did the other missionaries. Saint Lorenzo Ruiz died as he lived, a servant of the Lord. There are countless miracles attributed to Saint Lorenzo Ruiz. The one that stands out the most was the story of Cecilia Alegria Policarpio, a 2-year-old girl suffering from a rare brain disease. One night, as her family and supporters prayed to Ruiz for his intercession, the saint appeared to her in a vision. In her recollection, Cecilia said she was lying on her bed, unable to move from the pain, when she noticed a light. She remembered seeing a man holding a rosary, looking up to the heavens. The following morning, her illness was completely gone. She was able to sit on the bed by herself for the first time in her life. Lorenzo was beatified by Pope John Paul II on February 18, 1981. The beatification ceremony was held in the Philippines, making it the first beatification ceremony ever held outside the Vatican. His canonization took place at the Vatican on October 18, 1987. Saint Lorenzo Ruiz is the patron saint of Filipino youth, the Philippines, people working overseas, and altar servers.